Hello and welcome to another episode of the True Crime Cocktail Hour on Friday evenings. After a tough week of work, we deserve ourselves a little treat. And while we're at it, why don't I tell you about a mysterious true crime case? Because you would like that. That's right. So, in today's episode of the True Crime Cocktail Hour, on the 29th of October 2008, a man named Joe Musante committed suicide via handgun in Readers, Pennsylvania. Not just anywhere, but in the office of his church. Joe Musante had a sister called Rose Cobb, who he was very close to, and Rose, for his memorial service, traveled to Readers, Pennsylvania, just to learn that her brother's alleged suicide was not the only mysterious death in this small town that had occurred recently. No. And she also learned that all of these deaths had one common denominator: the church's pastor, Artur Schirmer. This is the True Crime Cocktail Hour, and this is the story of how one man's suicide revealed another man's double murder. Joe Musante left behind his wife Cindy of 18 years and his 2 daughters. Now, his suicide didn't come as so much of a surprise because Joey had in fact been battling mental health problems and alcoholism for years now. And this is why a couple of years back he turned to church for comfort and for help. He also worked as a carpenter, and he used his handyman skills to repair things around the church, but also, like many things in the neighborhood in general, it just seemed that he enjoyed just giving back to his community and especially the church. You know, it was something that he enjoyed to do. So as mentioned in the intro, Joey had a sister called Rose, and the two of them were very, very close. Rose, she had a life on her own now. Obviously, she lived somewhere else, so the two of them wouldn't see each other that often anymore, but they kept in touch. Although it is unclear if Rose really knew about everything in her brother's life or if he kept a lot of things to himself. Because as a matter of fact, Joey and Cindy had marital problems, a lot of them. And I guess in a small town like that, you go to couples counseling, but not at the therapist office. No. You go to the pastor of the community. So Joey and Cindy, they did just that. They asked the pastor for advice a couple of times, but it wouldn't really do much for their marriage, au contraire. Because a couple of weeks before Joey's death, his daughter Samantha had found out that her mother Cindy was having an affair. Not just with anybody. No, out of all people in Readers, Pennsylvania, she chose to hook up with said pastor. That's right. The pastor who was supposed to help them in their marriage did quite the opposite. So Samantha did not want to tell her dad about this affair right away. She started her own attempt of fixing this problem. So what she did is she wrote an anonymous email to this pastor, and it just said, quote, "Somebody knows," end quote. And she had hoped that this would be enough to scare them and end this affair. Then Cindy and Arthur found out that Samantha was the one to write this email, and they were furious. So they confronted her, saying that it was all lies, that she was making stuff up, that they were not having an affair, and so on. Samantha had evidence of this affair. So it wasn't just really like a gut feeling. She had physical evidence. I don't remember what it was exactly. Maybe it was an email or pictures or text messages, something of that sort. So she knew that she was right about this affair. And they were just trying to deny everything. And at some point, Samantha just said, you know what? Agree to disagree. She still did not tell her dad until Joey started to have suspicions of his own. And that's when she told him. Now, it was the ultimate betrayal. You know, the pastor, out of all people, who was supposed to help them in their marriage, coming from the church Joey had sought help and comfort at. It was just the biggest betrayal of them all. So Joey confronted his wife about this affair, and at first she denied, but then she was like, okay, you're right, I was having this affair, but I'm gonna end it. I'm gonna save this marriage, I'm gonna end things with Arthur. But we're here, so yeah, she did not. She changed her mind, and at some point she said to Joey, you know what, this is not just physical, I'm falling in love with this man. And that was unfortunately the end of Joey's and Cindy's marriage. So on the day of his memorial service and his funeral, Rose arrived in Readers, Pennsylvania to pay him her last respects. Now Rose, she is one of those people, I bet you know somebody like that, they just come into a room and they instantly pick up this vibe, they can read a room very well. They can also read people very well. And they know right away if something is up, and that was the case when Rose arrived in Readers, Pennsylvania. So she went to her brother's house, right? And Cindy was there and the kids were there, but something was off right away. Rose knew something was very, very wrong here, because according to Rose, when she got to the house, everything was everything was super quiet, Nothing was really prepared for the memorial service. It just seemed like everybody was pretending that it was a normal day. Cindy seemed to be doing fine, and Rose, she wanted to address this. And so she went up to Cindy and she asked her, hey, is there anything I should know? Anything you want to tell me? And Cindy, she considered it to be the perfect timing to tell Rose about her affair. So Rose is standing there and Cindy is like, yeah, well, actually the marriage was kind of over and I met a new man, and actually he's standing right over there. Do you see that pastor guy? Yeah, that's my new side piece. So Rose, she's standing there and she can't believe what she's hearing. But it's not even Cindy's infidelity that is bothering her the most. No, she is more surprised about this pastor, and she's got an eye on him, because she's like, okay, a pastor who gets involved with a married woman. What's this guy's story? So she dug a little deeper. So after the memorial service, Rose decided to stay a little bit longer and just talk to the people of the community and the church to find some stuff out about this sneaky pastor. But whoever she did ask, most of them were like, oh, the pastor? Oh, what a nice guy. So charming. Or trust him with my life. Oh, I don't know if he said that. But the important part is, at some point, somebody was like, oh, you know what? Actually, you should go talk to him. Because if somebody knows what you're going through right now, it's him. Because he just buried his second wife 3 months ago. She died in a car accident. And then Rose is standing there and she's like, oh, okay, well, he's not that old. Can you get a divorce as a pastor? I'm not sure. So what happened to his first wife? And they're like, oh, she had an accident too. Yeah, she fell down the stairs a couple of years back and she hit her head and she died. So tragic, so tragic. And Rose like, tragic? My sweet patootie. No, something is up. I'm not really into coincidences. So the very next day, Rose makes 2 phone calls. One phone call goes out to the bishop of the community, and Rose tells him that Pastor Sleazeball over here had not only been blessing her sister-in-law with holy water and hallelujah and amens, no, but also with orgasms. And I guess it wasn't the first time something like that happened, because the bishop believed her right away, and he forced Artur Schirmer to resign. So he was no longer a pastor anymore. Great, small win. And then the second call she made was to the police. And she ended up talking to an investigator called Jim Wagner. Now, Jim Wagner, he was listening to everything Rose had to say. And at the end, he goes, you know what? Actually, I have been suspicious of that man from the day his first wife died. Okay. Well, to Rose, it's pretty clear that something is up. To Jim Wagner, apparently too, so the two of them decide together that Jim was going to take another look at Joey Musante's alleged suicide, but also take another look at the cases of Arthur's first wife, Joel Schirmer, and his second wife, Betty Schirmer. So Joey Musante's case was the first one he looked at, and it turned out that it was indeed a suicide. You know, everything was just how it was supposed to be. There was no blood splatter out of place. He had gun residue on his hands. Arthur and Cindy had airtight alibis. The body's position aligned with a suicide. You know, it just seemed like a pretty clear case. And Rose, she accepted that. She was like, okay, then my brother really killed himself. She didn't even think to fight the evidence. She believed in it. And then she was like, okay, well, but what about his 2 wives? And Jim says, well, I found some stuff there. So let's start off with his second wife, Betty Schirmer. Now, Betty Schirmer died also in 2008, and she died in a car accident, allegedly. So this is Arthur's story. So apparently, she had already woken up in the morning like with tremendous jaw pain. And over the day, it got so bad that Arthur decided to take her to a hospital. Now, according to Arthur, they were going 55 miles an hour when suddenly a deer came out of nowhere. And he lost control over the car and crashed it into a guardrail. So there was a witness who saw the accident. And this witness, he came running, and Arthur got out of his car. And this witness asked him, "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay?" And Arthur said, "Well, I'm okay, but I don't think my wife is." And so they look over to the passenger seat, and Betty is just sitting there unconscious on the passenger seat. There's blood everywhere. And it is clear that she needs help. But for some reason, this witness is the one who called 911 and not Arthur. So Betty is taken to the hospital where she undergoes emergency surgery. She has one big wound on the left side of her head and two on the right side of her head. And the surgery went well, but she never regained consciousness, and eventually she was taken off life support. So Arthur, he had two daughters from his first marriage with Jewel, right? But the both of them loved Betty as a mother, like they were really, really close. And now Arthur had to tell his daughters, I think they were like teenagers or early, like young adults, something like that. And now he had to tell them that Betty also died in an accident. And he did so without showing any kind of emotion. So no one at this point questioned that it was not an accident. And according to Arthur and the doctors, an autopsy would not be necessary. So she was cremated and buried the very next day. My dear children, get this. This moron picked out an urn for his wife's remains that had a deer on it. What the fuck? I'm so confused sometimes. But Jim Wagner over here, he found some things in her case file that did not match Arthur's story and the story of an accident. There were no skid marks, and the car was barely damaged. At 55 miles an hour, which is already considered a high-speed accident, there should be way more damage to the car. Betty's head injuries were also like kind of out of place. Strangely enough, they all had like the same size, shape, and so on, you know? And then the blood splatter would also not fit the theory of an accident, because once they removed Betty from the passenger seat, they saw that the passenger seat was already soaked in blood and that she had in fact been sitting on blood. If you get hurt in an accident and you start to bleed, you expect the blood to be on you, beside you, in front of you, but not underneath you. Arthur Schirmer's first wife, Jewel, died in 1999. So apparently she was vacuuming the stairs when she looked like she had a heart attack, and then she fell down the stairs, hit her head, and died. An autopsy was performed, but the pathology came back negative for a heart attack. And also, strangely enough, she had suffered massive skull fractures, but nothing else. Like not a single broken bone in her body, just her head was injured. So the medical examiner, like, he wasn't so sure about this whole falling down the stairs theory, and so under cause of death he wrote undetermined. And he even went to investigators and told them,
"Hey, maybe you guys should look into this guy and into this case a little bit more carefully."
For some reason, no one ever did that. And in September of 2008, Betty had just died, Joey was still alive. Jim Wagner had already begun to observe Arthur Schirmer, and he put special emphasis on the way Arthur would park his car in his garage. And it turned out he always did it the same way. He would always back in. So that would mean the passenger seat would always be on the right side of the garage, right? And so eventually they got a search warrant for his garage, and they scanned it with luminol. And guess where it lit up? It did light up. On the wall, on the floor, on the right side of the garage. Right where the passenger seat would be. And so they confront Arthur with these new findings, and at first he denies everything. But I mean, the evidence is there, like, come on. And now he tells investigators that Betty got hurt carrying firewood from the garage to the garden. And they did in fact find a firewood pile like in the garden area, but some of the firewood had been wrapped up in newsprint paper. But on the newspapers, the date said 21st of September, which was one day after Betty's death. So unless her ghost carried the firewood to the garden area, Arthur was straight up lying. So with these new findings and the death of Joe Musante, the investigation against Artur Schirmer was in full swing. He was not arrested, but they were investigating against him. And during this time, he moved in with Cindy Musante. And when he moved in, Samantha moved out because you know, the relationship to her mother had like suffered a really deep cut since her father's suicide. And then the man who was kind of responsible for it, he moved in. And it was just too much for Samantha. So she moved out. But in summer of 2010, investigators realized that they had to hurry the fuck up with their investigations because in the summer of 2010, Samantha, all of a sudden, got a text message from her mother. And this text message said, "He proposed." And Samantha's like, oh boy. And I guess she said, "Congratulations, Mom." But she thought, well, as long as you're planning your wedding, might as well plan your funeral. Because Samantha was 100% certain that her mother would eventually wind up dead too. You know, dead wife number 3. So they were now actively building a case against Artur Schirmer. And so another part of that was that the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Joel Schirmer took a look at Betty Schirmer's medical records because she was cremated, if you remember. So he had no body to look at, but he had her medical records. And this is insane to me. He took her CT scans from the day she got to the hospital from her medical records, and he used that to build a 3D model of her wounds. And it revealed the most startling thing for anybody, because Betty's wounds looked exactly like Joel's. Same shape, same size. And so, this medical examiner changed Joel Schirmer's cause of death to homicide. And Artur Schirmer was arrested, as he should be, and indicted for the murder of his 2 wives. Cindy's daughter Samantha, she served as the key witness for the prosecution. Apparently she did an amazing job. Arthur, on the other hand, made a stupid decision, and he took the stand in his own defense. So after a 90-minute deliberation, Artur Schirmer was found guilty for second-degree murder of his second wife, Betty Schirmer, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Another unbelievably sad thing about this is that Cindy Musante, all the way, believed in his innocence, and she stood by his side throughout the entire trial and even after his conviction. It went so far that she took in his 2 daughters and raised them on their own while he was in prison, while her relationship with her own daughter, who most likely saved her life, went completely downhill. And I know their brain is just trying to protect them from something. Alright, anyway, my dear children, this is the end of today's story. I would love to hear you guys' thought. Let me hear them down in the comment section down below. Also, don't forget to make a sharp left turn to the subscribe button because it will really, really make my day. And I would love for you to join this community of alcoholics and true crime fans. Anyway, if you don't have any plans next Friday, I would love for you to come join me for another cocktail and, of course, another mysterious true crime case.